Welcome, everyone, to Season 2, Episode 1 of Ichabod's House. We are very excited that you are here. We're excited to be here. So, yeah, we're super excited. It's Season 2.
It is Season 2. I'm really happy that we've made it this far.
Me too. Well, we have kind of a creepy story to talk about today. It's called it's about the Nantiinaq in Alaska. But before we get to that, we have some stuff to take care of. Do we have any Google and Beyond?
I don't believe so.
I don't believe so either. But Jen has some information for us.
So we have a new website for new Season 2. You can find us and all of our episodes at ichabodshousepod.com. And that's pretty much it. Everything's still there. It looks exactly the same. We just have a new name. Should be a little easier to navigate to. We'd love to hear from you. Same email, same everything else, just a new website.
Fantastic. Okay, so for Ichabod's Nose, I have 2 picks. One I did last week. I did Sweet Magnolias, but that was Season 1. And I think I said maybe possibly that Season 2 was coming out February 4th. And it did. And it's lovely. And it did not disappoint. It was fantastic. And there were surprises and love and a little bit of making out. And it was great. The main guy character in that, Jennifer, I learned his name is Justin Bruning or something. He is from St. Helena, Nebraska.
Oh, interesting.
Right?
My sister-in-law is from St. Helena, Nebraska, so...
I know. Yes. Crazy.
Okay. It is crazy.
I know. And then my second pick, I don't know if you've seen this on Netflix. It's called Murderville.
I have seen it, preview for that.
So funny. They the majority of the dialogue is non-scripted, and these celebrities are the homicide detective in training with Will Arnett for a day. And they have Sharon Stone, Ken Jeong, Marshawn, I don't know his last name, I'm not familiar with him. Conan O'Brien is the first one. Anyway, super fun to watch. Don't watch it if you're a diehard. Well, actually, if you are a diehard, you can try to figure it out with the celebrity. And they tell the celebrity at the end if they're wrong or if they're right. Anyway, it's a lot of fun. Nice. It's super fun. Yeah, fun watch. So I recommend that highly.
I love it. Well, I have 2. My first one is a book called Night Film by Marisha Pessel. And it was written, I think, 2011 or 2012. Excellent mystery. Is it supernatural? Is it psychological? Kind of don't know. Mm-hmm. Fascinating book. Excellent read. Highly recommend that.
Are you done with it, or are you just in the middle of it?
I finished it.
Okay.
The next is Dave Built a Maze, which is kind of an indie film. Very comedy, maybe a little bit of horror in it, but it's all comical. It's very highly entertaining and creative, and that is on Shudder. So those are my picks.
Fantastic. I love it.
All right. Are we ready to get going?
We are ready.
All right. It was 1931 in Port Chatham, Alaska, and Andrew Kamluck was hot and sweaty from a hard day's work. Andy and I like to think he was wearing a flannel, checkered shirt, unbuttoned all the way down, showing off his 8-pack abs and his golden tan skin. His jeans were Shirley Levi's that fit tight enough in just the right places. He probably wore a cowboy hat or had on a baseball cap backwards. Regardless, he needed a drink.
That's right. He was hot from the summer rays shining down on him, and he was bearing the weight of this logging operation all by himself. His 2 partners did not show up again. They hadn't been showing up for days now. Excuses had stopped coming in. Sure, they started with, I'm sick, my wife's sick, my mom's sick. Someone was always sick. But those excuses faded quickly, as did their help with the business they all three were responsible for.
When they first started the logging operation on the Kenai Peninsula in Alaska, little things started going missing at first. The three friends thought they were just hazing each other. Jackets and lunches would go missing, but no one would claim responsibility. Once expensive tools started going missing, they realized they weren't hazing each other. Something else was amiss.
When the friends got to work one day, a thick logging chain was broken, and an axe was broken, splintered like a toothpick. After that, Andrew's friends had clearly had enough. They left Andrew to run the operation by himself. He had a young family to provide for and wasn't going to give up just because someone wanted to run them out of business.
But Andrew's friends didn't see it that way. They had heard the stories their entire life, just as Andrew had. The large, hairy man that ran through the woods, they believed, was the one stealing their lunches and breaking their tools. The Nantiinaq. Andrew thought it was ridiculous, until he didn't. He thought the Nantiinaq tales were just that, tales the adults told children to keep them from running into the woods by themselves. That old chestnut. Tales to keep them safe. He found out firsthand just how wrong he was.
But before we go any further, let's acknowledge our source for today's episode and give a little history on the Kenai Peninsula. Our source is the book Abandoned, The History and Horror of Port Chatham, Alaska, by Larry Baxter.
The Kenai Peninsula is 150 miles long and is filled with mountain ranges, glaciers, ice fields, boreal forests, marshes, tundras, lakes of all sizes, and has an expansive coastline with beaches. Vacation here. It is adjacent to oceans, has many rivers, and the waters are filled with bountiful fish. In 1957, oil was discovered. Today, oil and tourism are the largest contributors to the peninsula's economy.
I have a question. Do
Yes.
you know what the hell ice fields are? What are ice fields? Just
I would
big
imagine
sheets of
just
ice?
probably like glacier fields. I don't know. Hey, Google and Beyond for next week.
Okay. So there are many protected areas, such as the Kenai Fjords National Park, which is 600,000 acres of mostly glaciers. I think your husband would enjoy being there, Jen.
Mm-hmm.
There is also the Kenai National Wildlife Refuge with its 192 million acres. Some places in this forest have never been stepped on by humans. Many large areas are protected by tribes or corporations, and you need special permission to go there.
Nice. The Kenai Peninsula is nicknamed Alaska's Playground because of all the activities available, such as fishing, hiking, hunting, and many others. Moose and bear have plenty of room to roam free, and there are only 4 cities. The population of the biggest is just 7,000. The entire peninsula has a population of 58,000.
So I'm guessing there's a mix of like little small villages and then cities and then people who just live in the outskirts.
Right.
Okay, so back to Andrew and his sweaty, tanned abs. I mean, back to Andrew and his missing tools, because that's the most important thing here.
That is the most important thing.
I know, it is. He's been working all day by himself, and at this point he was cutting a log. It was hot, and he needed a drink. He walked... He walked about, I didn't realize that could go awry there. That was a potential. He walked about 15 feet away to get a cool drink from his thermos and wiped the sweat off his brow before it dripped all the way down his chest.
And he stood there, glistening in the sun, drinking that water almost too fast as it spilled out over his thick red lips and ran down his bare chest. He wiped his wet lips. What have you been reading at home, Andy? Have you been?
I was
you've been
watching
tapping
a
into
Zac
those.
Efron movie. I was watching a Zac Efron movie when I watched it. I thought, he is so good looking. I feel creepy because he's so young, right? I don't know if he's like 30 or what, but he's so young. But I was like, oh my God, he's so hot. It was
It almost
inspired
seems
by
like,
watching a Zac Efron movie.
okay, this episode brought to you by Zac Efron.
Right.
Okay, better that than the Werebear books we were discussing.
I tried to
in season
incorporate that, but it wasn't working. So I thought, yeah, I'm really inspired by Zac Efron. That's why this isn't working.
Okay, all right. Zach. Oh, no, not Zach.
We could call him Zach, sure.
Andrew wiped his wet lips with the sleeve of his shirt, careful not to cut them with the sawdust shavings clinging to the flannel. Concluding that it was almost dark and he had done enough for one day by himself, he walked back over to the log he was cutting.
It's not that kind of show.
To get his axe and head home.
But when he got to the log, the axe was gone. What was this? How did this happen? He looked all around the ground by the log. It was nowhere to be found. The ground was soggy and no shoe prints could be seen. He looked up to the sky in disbelief, and then, with all his anger swelling up over the realization that he would have to buy yet another axe, he let out a roar. "Leave me alone! I'm just trying to feed my family!"
Okay, I hate you.
Andrew
got an immediate response. Whoop, 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 from the tree line. He saw a dark figure move between two trees. He thought it was a bear, but it was on two legs. Possibly a werebear. He started hearing strange noises. To his left, he heard what sounded like a baseball bat hitting trees. To his right, he heard tree knocking. Is there a difference? We don't know. Let's read on and find out. Behind him, he heard voices speaking what sounded like gibberish.
The voices were different. One was low and angry, the other higher pitched and mournful. He likened it to when he and his wife argued. What follows is the English translation of what might have happened that fateful night on the Kenai Peninsula.
Must you? Seriously, Martin? Remember what happened the last time? Little Marty almost got shot because of you. I can't bear to go through this again.
Listen, Esther Sue, I am just protecting my family. Plus, I like fucking with them. This one doesn't even have a gun. Betcha I can make him run.
Classic Marvin. You just will never change, and I'm sick of it. You're sleeping in the south trees tonight. I'm going home to fix dinner for Marty. If you were wise, you'd come with me.
Nah, you go on ahead. I'm going to see if I can get him to wet his pants. But hey, put some more natty lights in the fridge for me, would ya? Thanks, babe. You're the best. And with that, he slapped her ass as she huffed by him.
Just then, Andrew saw another figure dash between two trees. This time, he was able to make out what the black figure was. A large, hairy creature. Andrew did, in fact, almost pee his pants with the realization that all of the tall tales he'd heard as a child were true.
Andrew quivered as he started to run down the path towards town, with his flannel shirt flailing behind him, showing his glistening abs.
Quivering
glistening abs, for sure. Why he didn't get in his vehicle and drive out of there is anyone's guess. Personally, we were chalking it up to fear and adrenaline, which, when mixed together, can be a dangerous cocktail, causing very bad decisions.
God. As he was running, he heard the whirring sound of something overhead. A large rock had been hurled directly at him. He stopped short, and the rock flew by him, just missing his head.
It was dusk now, and Andrew was trying to spy where his attacker was in the woods. When he found it, he was amazed at its size. At least 7 feet tall, with shoulders twice as wide as his own. He could glimpse it when it moved, but when it was still, it blended in perfectly with the bark and dark leaves of the forest.
The creature's solid black eyes locked with Andrew's. It started toward him, and he started to back up. The creature began to move at a jog-like pace toward Andrew, who kept backing up. The creature suddenly stopped a few feet away. It opened its mouth and roared louder than any machine or beast Andrew had ever heard before. Oop! Oop! Or would he have not? Is the oop oop just his call, or is his roar something like?
It's right. Right, exactly. Because it said as it got closer, it opened its mouth like so wide and bared its gums and teeth. But it opened its mouth so wide, it is something that shouldn't have been possible. How wide its mouth opened.
Like that?
No, we will read on about the sound in a minute. I'm trying to explain to you that its jaw must like come unhinged or something. There's something otherworldly, Jen, that's happening here. It's very intense. And our poor Zac Efron, Andrew Camluck, with his sweaty abs and chest was in very real danger.
I bet his sweaty abs were completely chilled by now.
Well, they could have been. All right, so he felt the ground vibrate. He felt the ground vibrate from this call, Jen. That's how loud it was.
Jesus.
And his chest rattle from the percussion of it as the Nantiinaq stood before him screaming. So to me, it was a lower vibrato than what a banshee would be. Like a low, yeah, or a foghorn. Whatever. However you want to describe it, yes, or imitate it, yes, for sure. Okay. So Andrew continued to move backwards as quick as he could until, as fate would have it, like any good horror movie, he tripped and fell over a log. Those fucking logs are tripping him up all day. He bumped his head on the base of the stump, and try as he might, he lost sight of the creature. The creature was still screaming, but the sound was fading out. Andrew likened it to old air raid sirens he had heard on radio programs.
Andrew was terrified the creature was still there. He managed to swing his legs off the stump and peek his head around it like a child who just got caught in mischief. The creature was gone, faded away with a scream into the night. Andrew's head hurt like a mother, with tears and snot flowing uncontrollably. He took a moment and wiped his face with that checkered flannel sleeve covered in sawdust. Still unsure if the creature was gone, he made his escape plan.
Even though Andrew was paralyzed with fear, he pushed himself up off the soggy ground. He heard a loud sound like metal hitting metal behind him. He spun around and saw another Nantiinaq. This one was not black, but gray, and had a strip of hair that stuck up on its head like a mohawk. He thought he caught a glimpse of a white-ribbed tank top, kind of like a wife beater, but he couldn't swear to it. I wasn't really sure on that one.
And don't get these guys wet after midnight. That's all I'm going to say.
Exactly.
This one was much bigger than the black one. It also looked older and angrier. It was also very, very strong as it was holding the log skidder over its head. Now, the log skidder is no small appliance.
Mm-hmm.
It weighs 400 goddamn pounds. It had taken Andrew and 5 other men to get it off the boat when it was delivered. But this creature, we'll call Martin, lifted it with incredible ease.
I think Martin does need his own book with some sweaty, glistening stuff. Maybe a little shave? Or maybe a little wash and fluff. I don't really know.
Here it is, folks. This is the werebear. And if you would like to know what it would be like to bed down with this guy, visit Amazon.com. You too could be tamed by the werebear.
It's safe to say that Martin was now really pissed.
I bet.
Maybe because Andrew was logging in Martin's family estate. Maybe because he was jealous of Andrew's baby smooth tan skin and tone abs. Maybe because Esther Sue was screaming so loud at Andrew, it gave Martin a migraine. We don't know for sure. But according to Andrew, Martin trudged at him, holding the skidder over his head, moving towards him with a purpose.
Jesus. Martin had a look of disgust on his face, and Andrew felt in his chest each step the creature took. Andrew was frozen with anticipation, and time seemed to stop as Martin hurled the skidder through the air toward him. It is said that his last thoughts were of his wife and child as he watched the skidder get closer and closer. So let's pause for a moment and legit or bullshit this creature and what we know so far.
Okay, so it's
sounds like a
important
Bigfoot
to
to me.
note that clearly. Correct. Yeah, absolutely. And Andrew did die, so we don't know. So everything that we just read, especially with Esther Sue and Martin, I took liberties. But in the book also, the writer just dramatized what probably happened. They did find his body at the logging operation, but by the log he tripped over, supposedly. But that skidder was on him. A 400-pound skidder was on him, on his head. So something hurled it from where it was to on top of him. Something happened. And they're assuming it was the Nantiinaq.
The Nantiinaq sounds like a Bigfoot or a Sasquatch creature.
Correct. I think it's the Bigfoot for Alaska. Yeah, like
Okay.
the Falk Monster for Arkansas and the Skunk Ape
Right.
for Florida or wherever it is. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it kind of just sounds like one
Yes.
of those creatures. That's interesting. Well, obviously, I'm sure that something like that happened. Especially if they were encroaching on its breeding ground or its, where it lived or where its family lived or whatever. I would imagine that was a thing that could potentially happen. So I would say legit. Something
Yeah,
had to
because
have
if you
thrown it.
think, I agree completely. And I think if you think about 150-mile long peninsula, right? And they were in an area that was smaller than the 192 million acre sanctuary that is part of that 150. So they're in a smaller area, but that's public. They're able to stake claims and do logging there, right? So they could have easily encroached on Martin and Esther Sue's family. But I think it's interesting that the person that actually dramatized this, I don't know if it was the author or if he just heard stories from town folk about what could have happened. I think it's interesting that there's two. One smaller that was black and one larger that was gray with the white mohawk. I just find that interesting. So I wonder, it didn't really talk about in the book if people saw those two different types of creatures. So I would like to know where the origin of that came from. So if anybody knows, let us know, because we've always heard it to be brown and hairy, but this one was black and then gray. So I just thought that was really an interesting perspective.
I agree. Okay.
Could be legit is what we're saying.
Yes.
Okay. So back to the legend. Also, around the year 1931, an old prospector looking for gold heard about Port Chatham and the wealth of natural resources and decided to check it out. Now, because he's an old prospector, this is not Zac Efron inspired. FYI.
Gotcha.
I couldn't go there in my mind. Okay. So he had his mule, Bessie, because that's what you have when you're a prospector and you're old in Alaska, some equipment and a map, and had checked with the locals about the best spots for mining gold.
Hamish Wilson was a man who rolled his own cigarettes, chewed on toothpicks, and loved his mule. He wanted to stake a claim and found out early on that he had little competition. Other than the chromite mine nearby, no one was out looking for their fortune.
The town elders warned the prospector to not go looking in the woods, to not stake a claim, to not mine at all. They told him of a hairy man that lived out there. Hamish didn't put much thought into these claims and headed to a river he thought was a great place to start.
Hamish was a hard man, remember. He rolled his own cigarettes, for goodness sakes. He had explored all over California and Canada, and it is said he never saw anything meaner than a wolverine. Hamish trudged his way through the soggy terrain for quite a while before finding a firmer footing on a well-established trail to the stream he was looking for.
After a late lunch for both he and Bessie, Hamish tied Bessie off on a tree in the shade, and he bared his feet for his trek into the icy stream. He thought it looked like rain, but decided to get started anyway. A little while after he had been in the river, he felt a tap on his shoulder. He looked up. No rain. He got back to his work and felt another tap. He looked up again and realized that the sun was shining through white puffy clouds. No rain.
Hamish figured that squirrels were tossing superfluous nuts at him, having some fun, because superfluous nuts fly the fastest and the farthest. After a while of working his way up the stream and having no luck, he decided to head back to shore and roll a cigarette. As he sat on a rock looking for his thickest pair of socks to warm his feet, he heard Bessie whinny and heard a thrashing in the trees near where she was.
He jerked his head up to see what was happening, and Bessie was gone. But how could that be? He figured she must have been spooked pretty bad to rip herself loose like that. He waddled over the rocks barefoot to the area she was tethered and investigated. He saw that the bridle reins were still tied to the tree, and there were no hoof impressions giving a hint as to what direction she might have gone.
He waddled over to the tree and saw that the bridle reins had been severed. Hamish didn't think that Bessie would be able to do that because she didn't carry a pocket knife, I'm guessing.
No, correct.
All right. He thought maybe a bear was able to sever the reins with a swipe of a claw. Regardless, he needed to get his feet dry and get socks and shoes on fast. If he was going to find Bessie, he was going to need shoes to do it. This wasn't a relaxing, soft beach. This was a beautiful, unforgiving forest that didn't give a rat's ass if your feet hurt. Yeah, I said it. I said ass.
While he was frantically trying to cover his feet for both warmth and practicality, he heard Bessie whinnying again. He looked up and saw her head sticking out of the brush, moving up the sloped tree line with only her head visible. Her body and her kidnapper were hidden. Her face was thrashing back and forth, and her eyes were wild and scary, fully open, exposing the white in terror.
As soon as Bessie was up far enough on the brush-covered hill, she went under the ocean of brush, and Hamish heard a loud crack. Then all was silent. Bessie was no longer screaming. He decided enough was enough, and he was going to get those damn thick socks on, put his boots on, leave Bessie in the dust, and go find the trail back to town, damn it.
Hamish got those thick socks and shoes on, grabbed his rifle, left his gear, and hurried back the way he came. Pause for cause. His journey would take him mostly downhill, and it would be daylight for quite a while yet. He was on the trail when he spotted a man up ahead. He was very excited about that because at least he would be with someone. He hollered at the man and told him about what happened to his donkey. The man stood up from a crouching position as Hamish continued to talk.
Hamish said, "Hey, over here. Something got my mule." Hamish was moving fast toward the man, hoping there was strength in numbers. He wanted to pay the man to accompany him to town. As he said this, the man stood up, and Hamish realized his mistake. The man let out a bellowing yell. Hamish stopped, and his relief dropped to the pit of his stomach and turned into despair.
He got his rifle out and had it trained on the creature as it was moving closer. As if it was gliding, it turned into the woods, and Hamish lost sight of it. Well, no one was going to take Bessie and get away with it.
Hamish trudged up the mountainside looking for Bessie, never to be heard from again.
Okay, so it's time to legit or bullshit this story. What do we think? Was Hamish real? Did he really lose Bessie to that Nantiinaq? Because again, this is one that a story grew from this. There was a prospector. He did go mining for gold. There are accounts of that. But they could just be saying, well, they never saw him again because of the Nantiinaq. So we don't know really. They never found his body.
Okay, but he was verified. He was a real guy who actually went prospecting and had a mule named Bessie and disappeared.
According to the town folk, yes.
I'm going to say legit instead of legit. I'm sure somebody went into the woods at some point and disappeared. But without, I can't give it 100% legit.
Well, all right then, Jen. There you go.
What about you?
I think it happened. I think that poor, I do. I think it happened. I think that poor prospector. But we don't know. I mean, we don't know. This is just our take on it.
I gotcha.
We don't really know.
Now, legend has it that the Nantiinaq could be a wild, hairy man, much like what we know as Sasquatch. However, others believe that the Nantiinaq is something that men can turn into, either from a virus or just because it's their choice.
Yeah, they talked about in there that there was a man who just was kind of a loner, and he just went out into the woods, and over the decades of living in the woods by himself, he grew out of all of his clothes, out of his shoes, his feet became bigger, he grew a bunch of hair, and he lost the ability to speak English and communicate. He only communicated in whoops and yells, and he would kind of terrorize the town. That's a legend as well. So,
okay.
And then one guy, they said, they went out into the woods, this group of campers or hunters or whatever, and they encountered this. And when they got back, this man got very, very sick. And they kind of exorcised him like you would a person who was possessed, and put candles around him and crosses and things like that. And then he suddenly became better. I don't know. So that's where those ideas come from. Some local tribes believe that the Nantiinaq have paranormal powers after a hunter shot one and chased it into a grove of trees, only to find it turned into a mouse and scurried away. Now, I thought I gave you this word first, but here I screwed myself and gave it to me. The Nantiinaq people, who also live on the peninsula, believed in a similar entity called the Nantiinaq, which means the one who steals us.
Interesting. Besides the prospector and Andrew Kamluk, there are other accounts of mysterious disappearances in Port Chatham. It is said that there are sheep hunters who went up into the hills to hunt sheep and never returned. It's unclear if this was several instances over a span of time or if it was one instance with several hunters at one time. Several articles have been published on Port Chatham and reference a number of bodies, quote, would wash into a nearby lagoon and were mutilated in a way that a bear could not do, end quote.
We have a timeline of events that highlight what took place in Port Chatham that led to the citizens abandoning their fair city.
In 1905, Native workers at the fishing processing plant walked off the job because of something in the woods. The seafood company ended up bringing in armed security to protect the area to bring the workers back.
In 1923, Sergius Moonen and his girlfriend heard loud whistling, and then a week later spotted a large, hairy, bipedal creature walking on the beach.
1931, mysterious death of Andrew Kamluk, who was killed when struck in the head by an extremely heavy piece of logging equipment.
Also in 1931, the prospector goes missing while searching for gold in Port Chatham.
1940s, Tom Larson spots Nantiinaq on a beach eating fish out of a fish trap.
In 1948, large human-like tracks are found. Hunters are found mutilated.
1949, 18-inch tracks found following moose tracks. Signs of a struggle and moose tracks end. 18-inch tracks continue up the mountain.
That's a Bigfoot. In 1950, the town is completely abandoned and the last resident, the postmaster, leaves.
1968, hunter chased out of a gully by a large, hairy creature.
In 1973, hunters took refuge from a storm and heard something that sounded bipedal walking around their tent for 2 nights in Dogfish Bay.
1973, article published in Anchorage newspaper. A retired school teacher was interviewed who had taught in Port Chatham during World War II. She told of cannery workers who went into the mountains to hunt sheep and bear and never returned.
In the 1980s, some hunters were screamed at.
2014, trees shaken by seemingly invisible force after Bigfoot researcher plays recording of baby crying. Researcher told of white Bigfoot seen in the area by locals in Nantiinaq.
So we know that there are skeptics. The sightings could be one of many, many things. There absolutely could be very large, hairy couples living in the woods like Martin and Esther Sue, fighting over stupid decisions made in a frustrated moment out of fear.
There could be large, hairy, murderous creatures who like to mutilate hunters. These creatures could get this way from a virus or choose to exit society, stop shaving, stop wearing clothes, and lose the ability to communicate with humans.
We don't know what's out there, but we need to seriously legit or bullshit the happenings in Port Chatham that led to an entire town leaving. So all of those events prior to 1950 happened, and the people just literally abandoned the town.
I say legit. I mean, I'm Are we doing a Yeti score for this one?
Yeah, let's do a Yeti score.
Okay. I'm going to give it a 5. I give it a full 5-finger score.
I do too. I completely agree with you because people in that time, they did not have the softness that we have today about things. Mm-hmm. And they can handle a lot of shit, especially in Alaska. Mm-hmm. A lot of big animals. I don't think people who lived in that time, in that place, would be very skittish. I just don't see them being very skittish at all. Or easily scared with the moose and the bears and all the creatures that they had to live with and share that forest with. So for an entire town to be that scared and driven away, I think that absolutely this happened.
Yeah, I agree with you. Really good episode. It makes me want to do more research. And we will post in the show notes, I will post the link to the book that Andy used for reference for today's episode. And that will do it for this week's episode. If you like what we're doing, please hit the subscribe button. And if you could give us a 5-star rating, that would be amazing. Also, we'd love to hear from you. You can reach out to us on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram. You can always email us as well at jenandandy@ichabodshouse.com. Until next week, remember Ichabod loves you.
Carry a flashlight and always bring extra pants.